Yeah, I'm Jackson. I have zero experience with carpentry.
I studied at a school for historic preservation in Boston and learned about how things were built, 250 years ago.
There's a long way to go. I'm nowhere near the top. Not that I thought I was, but there's so much more to do out there.
Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. Today we've got a very special guest, Gary Katz. And Brent, would you like to introduce Gary?
Yep, Gary, longtime friend, 20 plus years, I think. We've recorded video together, but you are, I think, or Gary is the godfather of video, trim carpentry, teaching, sharing. I mean, you were the original and the master. A huge respect for Gary, his love for architecture, his love for craft, his love for what we do. And so, Gary Katz, welcome to the show.
The Godfather.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you very much.
Well, we're excited to have you here. I guess, I've told the story a number of times about your kind of background into teaching, and what I'm encouraging people to do oftentimes is to practice in a number of different areas, practice in commercial, practice in residential, practice the high speed stuff, practice the high end stuff. And so really, I want to give people a chance to get to know you, but also just kind of your secret sauce to success. And in that, I remember your stories about trimming out apartment buildings and, the speed that you had to learn and, what you learned in that process. Can you tell everybody about that?
I think the first thing everybody has to learn is how to fail and enjoy it.
Nice.
Yeah. Because if you don't enjoy it, then you don't learn from it. And almost everything we do in the field is pretty much, not all of it, but most of it is learned through failure. And the apartment building thing is a really good example of it, because we really didn't know what we were doing when we took our first big building. I think it had like 100 units or something like that. And, we had to sink or swim right away. And we failed a little bit at the beginning using techniques that we'd used in custom homes that you can't do, because you're getting paid $6 or $7 a pre-hung door. You're getting paid 20 or 30 cents a foot for baseboard. You're getting $10 a shelf for closets and stuff. It's just like, you can't afford that. So you got to come up with you have to really think about it. And that's the cool part about, I think, our profession. You really have to learn from your mistakes, and you have to be constantly examining what you're doing. And it's like self-examination. It's like the best part of life in a way. You look at your procedures or your methodology, if you're into like lean philosophy, where you're constantly trying to eliminate waste and kind of like smooth out the wrinkles and stuff like that. That's what the finished thing was all about. We figured out how to measure closets very quickly with a stick. We figured out systems for scattering pre-fit doors and installing them really fast. We figured out just a lot of stuff the hard way, but we turned it into a really profitable business. And I think it was really important because when the economy changed and we started doing more custom homes, first there were tract homes, which really was really helpful having done the apartment buildings. But then when we started doing custom homes, we started integrating some of those same production techniques when we were doing custom high-end work. And it was effective. And it made the whole job site more efficient, more productive. It made all of us feel more confident, and secure, and it pleased our clients and our contractors that we worked for. So, I really believe you're right. You've got to stick your foot in everything, not just your toe. You got to go all in and do the production work and do the remodels and do the new construction, as well as, and you and I'll, I'm sure, get into this subject, as well as study the craft, the architecture, the history, and have an appreciation for that too.
Well, I think you beat me to the punch on that, and we can talk about that later, because I remember listening to you and reading your stuff, talking about neoclassicism and the classical styles and all that different stuff. So we can get into that, but let's go back to you were paid $6 to hang a door. I mean, wow, that is. Wait,
can we talk about? I don't understand the pricing.
That's not hanging a door. That's That's a pre-fit door.
Okay. Still, that's not very much.
Yeah,
Jackson.
Wait, what?
We
How does
got
that work?
$10 for hanging a door.
So basically, is it like a speed thing? Like how fast you can get everything done is how much you get paid. So they just basically look at the end product and go, all right, you got 30 doors in today. You get 30 times 7, $210. Is that how that worked?
Something like that. When you bid the job, you don't bid it by man hours. You bid it by piecework. You
Wow.
bid it by how many doors are in the whole building. There's 100 units and there's 6 doors in a unit, plus the entry door. And the entry door was always a hang. So like I said, you get $10 for the hang. And we couldn't do that. We didn't know how to hang doors that quickly. So we hired that out to a professional door hanger. And that was just like one of the thrills of my life, watching that guy hang doors. Yeah.
Really? Tell us about that.
There was a family, the Schaefer brothers. There was Al and Royal primarily. Royal hung all the doors in the residential construction job sites that we worked on, and Al worked on all the commercial buildings. Because Al was a real thinker. He liked to make jigs and fixtures. He used a lot of routers. He had a cart that he'd wheel through the building with a vise on it and a sharpener and all kinds of sharpening stuff for drill bits and putting in panic hardware and all that stuff, electric locks when they were first coming out. And Royal was just a beast. He just hung like maybe 35, 40 doors a day alone.
Dang.
Solid core, 3068 legacy solid core doors, half of them on the second floor. So it was like, just, all of the techniques we saw him using were just killer. My brother and I used to watch him, and he was such a sweet guy, he had the dirtiest mouth you can imagine. But he was such a sweet guy. He'd let us stand there and watch him for hours. And he'd say, and we'd go, whoa, what's that on your skill saw? And he had this little piece of metal that he screwed to the front of his skill saw, and it was bent over. And it bent over and came down right next to the blade in line with the blade. So as he was cutting, it was scoring the door. So he didn't have any tear out when he cut a door, when he cut the top and the bottom of a door, just because of that little piece of metal. So it eliminated him having to throw a straight edge down and pulling out a utility knife. He just whacked the door off with that skill saw, and he pushed that saw just as hard as he could.
I love
he
that.
could actually slow a door saw down. Yeah.
In that world you're describing, that sounds like a boot camp for just efficiency. Like you had to just, if you wanted to make any money, you had to figure it out and figure it out quick.
It was sink or swim. Absolutely. When we went in and bid our first apartment complex, the owner of the door store that, we were actually working for, because at that time, large contractors subbed out both material and labor to one outlet. It was usually the door supplier. And in this case, it was Union Door and Hardware. And we sat in Bob Reingold's office. And my brother and I said, I've told this story so many times, I feel like an idiot repeating it. But my brother said to him, okay, Bob, give us the plans. We'll take them home. We'll work up some bids and we'll get them back to you. But thanks so much for the opportunity. And Bob leaned back in his chair, and he looked at us and he went, that's not the way it works, boys. And then we both looked at him like, what are you talking about? And he said, here's what we're going to pay you. And he handed us this sheet of paper, and it was $6.50 for a pre-hung, 10 cents a foot for baseboard. There was no bid. You took the price or you didn't take the work.
Wow.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that really forces your hand on the efficiency angle, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's sink or swim.
Absolutely.
The how long? So it's 100 units in that apartment. How long did it take you to get in and out of? Was that a month, or was that like 3 months, or?
It took us, I'd say, by the time we were a quarter of the way through the first project, we had systems in place that kept our guys moving. And by the time we were about halfway done with that project, we were starting to establish kind of like an esprit de corps, among our crew. We had a system where nobody was allowed to pick up a tool until everything was scattered into every single unit. All the pieces for the closets, all of the doors, all of the extra casing, all of the jams and stuff for the bypass doors, all of the track, everything for every single unit. And then we'd spread hoses for air, because this is way before cordless tools. We'd spread all of our hoses and we'd spread power. And there'd be like 6 of us on the crew, and each of us would go inside of a unit at the same time. And that was one of the real brilliant things that we came up with, because everybody started competing with each other.
Oh yeah.
You know? And my brother would go through every single unit and look at every single door, every single piece of base, everything, to make sure it was done very nicely before he'd sign off on it. So it was really a cool system. Everybody enjoyed it. You know, we had a good time. The days went by really quickly.
I just imagine sawdust. As soon as it's like, go, and then it's just sawdust flying, guys running around.
Yeah, you're looking through the hallway. Sawdust is flying out of each room.
What was your next step from those apartment complexes to like the home side? Was that at the next step?
It was about that time that we started doing commercial buildings too. And that was a whole different game. And sometimes we'd do commercial buildings and we'd work in them at night, because you couldn't work in them during the day. And because there were people working in the offices. And excuse me for my dog. There's somebody at the door. I'm going to
He's happy about something.
But we'd do all the commercial work at night. Sometimes we'd work from like 6 in the evening until about 3 in the morning. Go home, take a quick nap, you know, make your lunch, and then go off to the residential jobs.
That's a young man's game, it feels like, right? That hustle and that kind of, you can't do that when you're, 50, I don't think. Maybe your buddy who was hanging the doors did it better than I could. But then when did you start teaching? When did you start sharing, kind of the all the videos you did for Taunton and for all the different groups like that? I mean, when did you start doing that? When did that teaching career start?
I started writing for Fine Home Building in 1994, and wrote a couple of articles on hardware, on door hardware, locks. It was kind of really, your first article for Fine Home Building is, I don't know, it's like your first girlfriend in a way, you just something you just don't forget,
It's a big deal.
Stays with you. And the folks at Taunton asked me if I'd be interested in writing a book. So I wrote the Door Hanger's Handbook. And then about, maybe a year later, I got a phone call from Craig Savage, and who he's a good friend of Craig Flynn's.
Absolutely.
And Craig was running JLC Live pretty much. He was the idea man, behind JLC Live. And he said, hey, we want you to come and do these shows and hang doors for people, in front of an audience. Can you do that? And I thought, yeah, I think so. And that's how that started. Yeah.
And what's that acronym?
Journal of Light Construction. It's a great magazine. It still is. But they have a live event where a bunch of people come and show drywall, and they show trim, they show framing, they show all these different things. So
So you were the carpentry guy.
He was the door hanger, and then
I was there was a group of guys, maybe 10 guys, that did framing, and Myron Ferguson was doing drywall, and there were several writers from Fine Home Building. Rick Arnold was, one of the big presenters at JLC. There was just this is where I met Jed Dixon. That really changed my life. Mike Slogat, guys that taught me, stuff that I couldn't learn on my own, my brother wasn't even, because my brother really wasn't a cutting edge carpenter. He liked the old techniques, and I learned from these guys how to use a calculator. It's just freaking changed my whole life, because I was always math challenged. And Mike Slogat and Jed Dixon were incredibly patient. Year after year after year, we'd see each other at these shows. And every single time they'd try teaching me the same stuff, because I'm so challenged with math. But it finally got through. I finally learned some stuff from them.
Well, Brent was kind of saying earlier, you're the godfather. And now young guy like me who, goes on the internet and types in something carpentry related. I mean, you're the one that comes up, how to hang a door, how to do crown molding. It was always you. So one thing I liked about the way you did stuff was that you were always so methodical. Like it was just no fluff. This is what you're doing. This is how to do it. And now hearing your story about the kind of efficiency boot camp and everything you've been through, it makes sense why you've mastered the trade, really.
Well, we had guys that worked for us, and I think that was a large part of how the methodology evolved. When you have a crew, you have to teach them how to do stuff, and you learn real quick that you can't allow anybody to do stuff different than the way everybody else is doing it. Everybody's got to have the same step-by-step system for everything in order to be seriously efficient, and to make sure that you don't have any callbacks. That's like, you can't have a door that doesn't close or latch or something. You can't have cracks in your crown molding after it's installed, that kind of stuff. And so you come up with systems to protect yourself against each one of those eventualities. And after a while, I realized, wow, this is something maybe other people aren't doing. Maybe they're not making cut lists for baseboard and crown molding and stuff like that, and so it all became part of the overall system, that I was teaching guys on our crew, and it was just kind of like a natural progression to start doing it in articles. Yeah. This is when people read. This is a long, long time ago, when people actually read things,
Well, Gary, it seems like you did move along with the times pretty well. Just hearing that Richard found you on YouTube and, found your old videos like that. I mean, that's cool that you jumped from writing articles to then making videos. What was it in your mind that kind of signaled that change, or how did you know to jump to video making?
I started just writing. And then Fine Home Building, when I did my first articles, those lock set articles, they sent a photographer out. And I was just entranced, with the lighting, the Polaroid camera that he used to take Polaroids to check the lighting, and the slide film that they were using, the Kodachrome at that time, or whatever, the Fuji, whatever we were using. And he had to take it down to the photo place and have it all so we could see the slides. It was just such a trip, and so I really got into photography, and that helped me with the articles, not with the Fine Home Building ones, because they always sent an editor out to photograph, but the JLC articles, for sure, you had to know how to shoot pictures or you couldn't publish an article. You could write great, but if you didn't shoot pictures of your work, you had nothing. So, and then I resisted the video for a long time because I said, I spent so many years learning how to take a good photograph. Forget video, I'm not getting into it. But I eventually had no choice, and I enjoyed it. It was really fun. I really had a good time doing it.
Well, yeah, Gary, you really touched on something that I think is important. We're doing a podcast, and we get the question a lot, like, you're filming it. Why are you filming a podcast? But we do really have such a visual medium that I think it is helpful to get some visual aids in it. And so it is funny to hear you say that if you didn't know how to take a photo, you weren't able to produce an article, because it is one thing to be able to read about it, but then be able to see it and just be able to put that image in your head. I mean, it is a really helpful tool, especially in the education of carpentry and craft, and it's really crucial.
I think human beings are predominantly visual animals. And I know Brent would fully agree with this, because, we see beauty. We smell good food, or we feel neat textures and stuff like that. But boy, the eyes, the vision, is the predominant sense that guides us, and leads us. And video is just such an incredible step, evolutionary teaching, that it's just incomparable. I can say this, people that are really into reading, and I share this with Brent, when we're reading, we're actually visualizing. And a lot of people that can't read well or don't enjoy reading, like my brother's one, it's just the way you are, it's genetic, it's not because you're smart or stupid or something. It's just some people are able to read and visualize imagery of what it is they're reading at the same time using their imagination. And
Totally.
a lot of people aren't. And so video is just so much more effective as a teaching tool than writing.
So when did you start falling in love with the past? I mean, I think that's a mutual love we both have, and you've documented and taken so many pictures of these historic buildings. And I know you and I went to the Green and Green one time, shot some video. But I mean, even the older stuff. I mean, when did that love start?
I like telling this story, but I hate it too because I always start crying. But it means an awful lot to me. I went back to school in the late 80s, around 87, 88. I went back to graduate school, and I had a professor who mentored me through the graduate program in English. And I was working full time and taking one class, a semester, and getting a degree in English, getting a master's in English, which was something I wanted to do when I was a kid. And he took me to the Huntington Library once, and I checked out a book on an architecture book. And I actually have a copy of it here. And the first page in the book was an advertisement, an advertisement, is the way it's pronounced, of all of the people that sponsored the book. Because back then, in the 1700s, an author would pre-sell the book in a sense to a certain number of people, and those people were basically sponsors. They'd forward him the money, they'd advance him the money for the publication to print it and distribute it. And the list of people that did that were carpenters, joiners, wheelwrights, masons, all the people from our trade. And I thought, God, there was a time when professional tradespeople were really respected. They were some of the most respected people in the community. And that just wiped me out. It just really had an impact because I always thought I was just kind of like a bum. Like my mother always said, only immigrants work with their hands. When are you going to stop, using tools and be a general contractor, like you are? I'm kidding, just kidding. My mother would have just loved you, not just because you're so tall, but because you don't use tools, And my brother and I, we couldn't get away from the tools. We were like, it was just so much fun to make something.
No doubt.
And just the fulfillment of being able to actually, trim out a house or do a coffered ceiling, or something really crazy. It was just too much. It was like, I've said this before, it was like a drug.
You started touring historic houses. You started going around and kind of asking the museum director and said, hey, can I come check out this stuff, take some pictures, right? Is that what happened?
I finished my degree in English, and almost immediately, having been visiting the Huntington Library, researching my degree, I did a master's thesis on comparing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to John Milton's Paradise Lost.
Wow.
Not very resonant or something with carpentry, but I finished the degree, and I had kind of established a relationship with the Huntington Library as a reader. I had a rare books reader card that allowed me to go inside their rare books, department and check out books that, you had to wear white gloves. They had these white cardboard stands you put your books in.
Oh, yeah.
There were no pens allowed in the room. It was really just extraordinary. And I started researching mantelpieces because of a client who had asked me to design a mantelpiece for him. And I knew when I built it that it just looked like crap, I couldn't understand why. And that really got me. And the mantelpieces and researching them and looking at old books from the early 1900s and 1800s and 1700s on how to design a mantelpiece was just eye-opening. And that's what got me into architecture. I was like you, there was a point where it bugged me that I couldn't identify certain architectural styles because I didn't know anything. And so that whole world opened up to me through books.
That is awesome.
And then I thought, wow, I'm going to do a book on mantelpieces.
Yeah.
And that's when I started contacting museums and historic homes. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who build a mantle today and it looks like crap and they just go with it.
Yeah, totally.
They don't.
Oh, yeah.
They don't care about like the beauty of it, and that's kind of a question that's been on my mind. And I want to ask you is like, what is your opinion on the state of craft today as far as carpentry? And what I mean is like, how do you feel about the foam moldings, the MDF? You know, the kind of what we believe are like inferior materials. Like, what's your opinion on those things?
I think first, you said people don't really care if it looks good. I think people do. I think even the guys who don't seem interested in learning would like to know how to build a
True.
mantelpiece, say, that looks better. They just don't know, either they don't know how to find that information or they're not motivated enough to learn.
Right.
So we can kind of cross them off our list. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because there's no way you can help. There's no way you can help them. But
Yeah.
What you also were asking about materials and stuff kind of fits into that same paradigm or that same subject matter. You know, you don't have a choice in a way. You have to use MDF moldings because how many of our jobs are dollar driven? You know what I mean? Everybody's on a budget. You can't afford to go use solid wood everywhere. MDF is God, it saves so much money. And so you got to be good. You got to become fluent with using materials that you prefer not to, but require different kinds of installation techniques. Like I always learned that you could not cope MDF molding. We didn't even try it. You know, it was just ridiculous because when you cope molding, that leading edge is always a little bit longer, so it butts in tight, against
crumbles,
the previous piece that's butt cut, and it crumbles, right? That's what we learned. That's what all of us have figured out. So what do? You don't. You miter everything. Now, if you're mitering MDF and you just glue it once and you put your pieces together, your miters open up. So you learn the hard way, oh, I've got to double glue this. I've got to put a layer of glue on first just to prime that crap, because it sucks up the glue so fast. And then I got to put on another layer of glue to actually adhere the two pieces together. So I feel like, and the same with Fypon or polyurethane. I don't even know if Fypon still exists, but polyurethane moldings and stuff. It's the same stuff. What kind of adhesive do you use? What kind of can you use polyurethane adhesive, or can you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these lessons you have to learn, and what's kind of cool in a way is it's separating the wheat from the chaff. There are so many things we need to learn, and if you're not willing to take that risk, if you're not willing to admit your vulnerability and say, hey, I don't know, I need to learn how, then you're not going to become an advanced carpenter. You're not going to lead the trade. You're not going to succeed really with modern materials and all kinds of stuff. So this goes right to house wrap and flashings and sealants that are compatible or incompatible. There's so many issues in construction these days that in order to be good, you've got to really keep up with the technology.
Like, are you encouraged by the state of craft with carpentry? Or you have a negative view of it? Where are you at on that?
I would say I'm a little bit more on the positive side than you are. Recognizing that you have, since I met you, you've been on this mission to turn the tide. And every time I meet you and speak with you, and even just a few months ago when I saw you in Texas, it was the same Brent, I'm losing. Kind of like you had this your mission was so motivated, partly because you felt like you were losing, you know what I mean? You were losing the fight or something. But I kind of look at Instagram and YouTube as look at the massive change that's occurred in our industry. There are so many people that were out there all along that, like I said earlier, about the guys with the mantelpiece that really just don't know any better, but they want to know. They just don't know how to find out. Now, today, it's so much easier to find out. That stuff is so much more available. And I think it's really so cool because the guys who are providing really good information on YouTube and Instagram, they've got hundreds of thousands of followers. And that is such a sign, it's such a signal of, all right, there's somebody that's truly valuable that's offering some really good information, Yeah, sometimes you got to be careful. You got to sift through a little bit. Sometimes it's not cutting edge, Sometimes it's flat wrong. But hey, I've written articles and published stuff that was flat wrong too. You can't beat yourself up for making mistakes, But anyway,
Absolutely.
I think we're on, let's call it the road to recovery. If that's the way, describing how you've always felt like, oh my God, we're in the pit or something. Well, I think we're on the road to recovery, and just what you're doing right now. I mean, I saw you struggle so much trying to put together a television program, and you finally did, and it was awesome. It was hilarious. It was entertaining, but I never really felt like you were achieving your mission, your goal, which was doing what you're doing now, of opening people's eyes up so that they can appreciate the history and learn how to really truly study the craft that their career is dependent on. Yeah.
Well,
Blah 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 blah.
yeah, no. I love your positivity. I love you. I've known you a long time. I'm 57 years old. I get to say that to people. I love what you do for carpentry. I love your friendship. And so I appreciate you saying all that. I probably do pine over the pain of the lost art of building too much. And so I really appreciate you saying that. That's very kind.
I think that Brent is succeeding and he's finally feeling it. You can see it.
Yeah, it is fun, Gary, to hear you say all of that. Just being his son and being able to hear a lot of the I have my eyes open in seeing what is wrong and what's missing in craft today, and the production builders who are doing it wrong 1,000 times to the craftsmen who are doing it right, 5 times for every, or maybe 1 time to every 1,000 times that they're doing it wrong. It is fun to hear your positivity and to be reminded of the fact that there is another side out there of people who are doing it right. And, I think I get in my head a little bit of that perfectionist mentality where it's like, man, it is really frustrating to hear about all these builders who really just care about the bottom line. But then to be reminded of, people are visual people. And if they're seeing the craft that's out there and good craft and what it looks like, that does start to change the tide a little bit and start to move it in the right direction. So I do like your assessment that we're on the road to recovery. Maybe not there yet, but I am curious if you would have any insight into what would help us continue down that road of recovery, what would help us continue to take the next step in the process to recovering build in America.
I think 2 things. And the first thing I've got to say is, I gave all these kudos and stuff and applause to Instagram and YouTube, but there's a risk there too of misinformation, like there is in every other part of our culture. I got a DM from Dan Parrish from Millworks by Design the other day, and it was he copied me a video that he'd found on Instagram of a guy who, we probably all know, but I'm not going to mention his name. And he has hundreds of thousands of followers. And he was demonstrating in his Instagram video how to install a window. And he had this really interesting technique. And he showed how to do it. He never once, checked the situation out. He didn't level the sill in the rough opening. He didn't install a can strip. He didn't really check the function of the window. He put fasteners through the 4 corners and checked to make sure it was plumb and level. He never, ever once talked about control lines, benchmark lines, about getting the head of his window level and aligned with the heads of the doors or the other windows. And I think Frank's already on to what, I'm talking about. And I know Brent is, boy, when you come on that job as a trim guy and none of the casing lines up, whoa. So that kind of stuff we have to, that's a good example of the kind of thing we have to really watch for. And in a way, I guess it's going to require, okay, here's what it's going to require. There's a two-part answer to this, so I'm really sorry it's going to take me this long to answer this.
No, I love it. This is great.
It's going to require trust. And I hate to sound kind of woo-woo, but in order to make mistakes and learn from them, you have to be willing to accept vulnerability. You have to trust yourself that you're going to be okay no matter what happens, and that kind of leads to my next point is we have to be more willing, we have to be less a bunch of haters and more a bunch of appreciators in a way. We have to be able to answer that video that Dan sent me. Somebody has to be able to answer that video like immediately and say, whoa, wait. Make sure you people who are watching this or tell that guy or reach out to that fellow and say, wait, shoot another video right away and make sure you show them how to do this and this, because otherwise, you're doing a disservice. And that's what I always felt was the only real sin that a carpenter or a teacher especially could commit. And that's teaching somebody how to do something that's wrong. And you gotta, like I said, I've done it. You gotta be willing to say, oh God, I really screwed that up. I'm so sorry. Don't do that. Don't use that technique I showed you 2 years ago. Here's a much smarter way of doing it, and you have to be willing. You have to be willing to trust that you'll be okay in order to accept that kind of vulnerability and that kind of criticism. And I think that's one thing. The second thing is it's the end users, the buyers, the homeowners that drive the budget. And yeah, sometimes it's the contractors who don't have the imagination or whatever to educate their clients. And I know Brent is going to say, God, no kidding. 90% of my job is showing them why they should do this instead of saving $20 and doing that, And I think that's just such a huge thing that's missing, because all we've seen are these television programs that show you how to remodel your house in 30 minutes, and that's a huge disservice to the entire industry. So that's part of the lesson we have to help end users, homeowners learn, how they can be more comfortable in a smaller home, fewer square feet, without the huge bells and whistles, and with true quality instead of crap. And that's basically it. Boy, you're going to be much happier in a 2,200 or a 2,400 square foot home with solid core doors than you are and true moldings, and some kind of architectural style that's human, that reflects what you love yourself, than you are going to be in some big, huge box with 8 oak hollow core doors and MDF molding, that's 5,000 square feet.
Preach it, Gary.
And eventually your kids are going to move out. You're going to end up living in that place with just you and your husband, or something.
Right.
Like, God.
Can we have you as a permanent guest here? You're like exactly on the same page as us.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It is fun. I've been watching a lot of videos recently on the feel of a home, and it's the way furniture is set up in a room. I forget the name of it, but feng shui. There are all these videos kind of explaining how you feel situated in a room and how you. And it's usually guys sending in videos of, I've got an apartment room, an apartment building, but their room is like, let's say 300 square feet. It's just tiny. And they're like, how do I organize my bed? How do I organize all these things? And all the concepts that they're talking about are just like how to make this room more comfortable because of its size and everything like that. And this guy will transform a place and make it look so much more comfortable, because you walk into this room and it's crowded. There's no room. There's a bed that's taking up the whole room. and then he just changes like 3 little things and it makes it better. And you would think like when you're walking in, oh, you just need more space. And then he reorganizes the room and you're like, oh, it could have been done in that room. And it's great the way he set it up. And it's kind of the same idea, obviously not to that extreme, because you can deal with a, 2,500 square foot house versus a 8,000 square foot house, and be so much more comfortable just in the way that you set it up. And I think those moldings, if you take the budget that would have been used for square feet and put it into things that speak to your soul and speak to, just when you walk into a room, like you're saying, just common design throughout a house, man, it is so much more comfortable and it is so much nicer. And a house can be made better than you think. And all it takes is knowing the right steps and knowing the right information to be able to put it together and go, oh, wow, this is way better and way cooler. So I love what you're saying.
That opens up so many, really important subjects. One is, if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to capture that feeling, that makes you comfortable, then you need a guide, and in other words, you need a designer or an architect or something like that, or you need a finished carpenter who really knows his game, because really, to tell you the truth, it's the finished carpenter.
Amen. Amen, brother. Preach it.
And I'm not exaggerating at all. It's a flat out truth. And you need clients who are also more trusting, who are, like I said, back to that vulnerability thing, who, gosh, when I first learned how to go steelhead fishing and how to row my boat through whitewater, I didn't just jump in the boat and head downriver. I got a guide, I got a fishing guide who taught me how to do that stuff, and I still go out with him because he's still teaching me, and it's the same with everything. I think it's the same with absolutely everything. If you can't figure out how to do it on your own, if you're not comfortable, then find somebody who will make you comfortable. And now back to, you really started my engine here, back to what you were talking about comfort and finding comfort. Having spent over 20 years researching and writing this book on mantelpieces, I have learned that the classical orders are not there as paradigms for what's right and what's wrong. They're there as examples of what makes people feel comfortable and what makes them have a sense of proportion, primarily, not just design. It's the classical orders aren't there so you can pick between the Corinthian and the Ionic and the Doric. They're there so that you can pick a kind of size, a sense of proportion. Do you like stuff that's really heavy and stout? Then you're going to want to work with the proportions that are predominant in the Doric and the Tuscan order. Do you like really light stuff that's more modern and feminine, kind of, in a sense? Then you're going to want to work with proportions that are dominant in the Corinthian order and the composite order. And when I'm saying proportions, I mean, how big is this compared to that? That's what I mean by proportion, ratio. How big around is the column compared to the height of the column? And so everything I've talked about in the last couple of minutes about the classical orders is way over the top, and people are going to go, oh my God, there goes another guy off on, some stupid tangent about the classical orders. But if you're designing a mantelpiece and you want it to succeed and you want it to please your homeowners, you got to know, do they like the heavy look, the masculine look, or do they like the lighter feminine look? And that's going to tell you whether you should be relying on proportions from one order over the other, and that's going to determine how wide the pilasters are, how tall the entablature is, and how big the crown molding in the living room is. I mean, it gets down to, and Brent does such a great job of breaking this stuff down, like how tall should the baseboard be? That's a really huge question. And that is one of those little defining features that helps someone feel comfortable in their home. So one person may be really comfortable in a like a kind of a Tudor style home, real masculine, heavy, and another might be really comfortable in a modern home that has no baseboards, or in a home that has streamlined base, that kind of thing. And your responsibility as a finished carpenter or designer is to identify, first of all, not what pleases you, but what is going to make your client feel comfortable. And we may as well get right down to what that means. It means safe. It means what makes them feel, what's familiar to them. And familiar is like the base word is family. This is all about safety. It's about, what makes somebody come into their room after being at work all day and be able to relax. Well, safety, comfort, familiarity, all of that.
What I love about the classical system is that it introduces a human scale, and that human scale based on the human body, when it's projected onto the walls, it does make you feel safe. It does make you feel, at home. And so it's a beautiful thing.
I was just going to say, that's why it's what makes people feel comfortable, because It's familiar. And I'm so glad Brent broke in and said that, because that's why after 2,000 or more years, we're still, depending, 3,000 years, we're still dependent on the classical orders, because they encapsulate and they reflect human scale, and they make us feel comfortable.
Yeah. It's why you can walk into a Gothic cathedral and feel like you're just a tiny person, just staring up at these vast, structures. And then at the same time, you can walk into, a small, like a home, like a colonial style home, and feel like, oh, this is like a place where I'm supposed to hunker down and like have a nap. It's a little comfort. I was watching The Lord of the Rings recently. The Hobbit hole makes you feel small and comfortable, and then the giant castles and everything are like, oh my gosh, you're craning your neck up at them, and you're just watching it on a movie, but it explains that scale.
But think about that for a second. Because it fits in perfectly with what I was saying. When you go inside of a Gothic cathedral, who's the owner? Who's the homeowner? Who inhabits that? God. And it should be, like celestial. It should rise to the heavens, It should move you with drama and space, And that's its purpose. That gives you a sense of comfort and safety. And a castle. Who's the homeowner? The homeowner is some feudal lord or whatever who wants the respect of his the people that live on his property, on his land,
right,
and are supporting him in a sense, who he is actually supporting in a way,
Yes.
And so that's the purpose of his home.
Totally.
So you get it? It's like so simple, when you break it down into the simple, who's it for,
Well, and I feel like this is the missing piece where it just makes sense. Whenever you lay it out like this, it makes sense. And it's really cool.
Gary, what is next for you? You've got this book that you and I have been talking about. You went and took pictures for the mantle book, the magnum opus. Is that what we're going to call that?
You and I have been talking about this book for the whole time I've been working on it, and you've been waiting for it to come out, I think.
I have.
So that you can write one yourself that's better,
No, I've been waiting for that book. But you've got the photography finished. You've got, it's pretty much ready. You're looking for a publisher, but is that taking up most of your time, or what do you're still teaching, you're still doing these things?
The only thing, I'm still teaching a little bit, I'm still doing occasional events. I'll be at the IBS show. So I'll see you there probably, but, I don't teach too many of them. I professionally, that's about all I'm doing now is trying to finish that book. I've gone through a complete edit of the book. In the meantime, I'm still looking for a publisher, but God, this has taken so long. It's a act of patience. It's an exercise in patience, just like carpentry,
Well, that's really cool, Gary. Excited for that book to come out. I don't know when that will be. Don't want to, no pressure there, but we want to thank you for your time. We want to respect your time. We've been going here for an hour. It's just been awesome hearing from you, learning from you, and just getting to hear your take on craft in America right now and hearing your story. So we would love to point people to more of your things. So is there anything people should be on the lookout for? Or if you want to plug anything, you're more than welcome to. I know you were humble before and said you didn't want to, but you're such a resource. We want to make sure people know where to find you.
All of the videos that I produce are on the This is Carpentry YouTube channel. And so you can find all of that at This is Carpentry on YouTube. And, you know, you can find me on Instagram. I go on maybe once a week, you know, to follow people and to post stuff, but I'm not very active. And my Instagram handle is Gary Katz 1. And that's it. That's pretty much all I do these days. Yeah. And I can't thank you guys enough for inviting me on.
The pleasure is
Anytime
ours.
I get an opportunity to talk with Brent and everything, it's just so thrilled. I'm really tickled to meet everybody, you know, to meet Brent's son and Frank and everything. It's just like, wow, you know, pretty cool.
Gary,
cool.
you're the best. I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming on, and we'll have you on again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.